The sterling Grand Hall shimmered beneath towering chandeliers as Manhattan's elite floated across the marble floor, wrapped in diamonds and entitlement. At the far edge of the room, still wearing a catering uniform she never chose, Genevieve Hayes steadied a silver tray while pretending the whispers weren't about her. Then Victoria Sterling stepped forward, and the air tightened. She raised her hand. Slow, calculated, meant to humiliate. "Know your place," Victoria hissed. "Staff speaks only when spoken to." Genevieve didn't bow her head this time. Her spine held firm, her eyes lifting with a quiet defiance that made Victoria's lips curl. Preston Sterling didn't even glance her way. "Just do what my mother says, Jen," he murmured. "Don't embarrass us again." And then the room shifted. A tall, broad figure cut through the crowd with a presence that shattered the music mid-note. Conversations died as he stepped between Genevieve and the raised hand. "Try touching her," the man said, voice low and dangerous, "and you won't lift that hand again." Victoria froze. Genevieve turned toward the stranger, toward the man who should have been a world away. Silas Vane was never supposed to be here. And definitely not for her. What truth is powerful enough to stop the Sterlings cold? If you want to see the moment everything explodes, hit like and subscribe to support Canada's Heartfelt Tales. The moment Silas Vane stepped between Genevieve and Victoria Sterling, the ballroom's golden glow sharpened into something colder. Conversations didn't just pause, they collapsed, leaving a thick silence hanging beneath the chandeliers. Victoria's raised hand trembled mid-air, rage wrestling with a sudden, unfamiliar fear. Genevieve said nothing. She didn't need to. Her heartbeat thudded like distant war drums, not from fear, but from recognition. Silas Vane had vanished from her life years ago, the one man tied to a part of herself she buried so deeply even she sometimes doubted it existed. And yet here he was, standing like a wall carved from iron and night. Preston finally snapped out of his daze. "Who the hell are you?" he demanded, stepping forward. "This is a private event." Silas didn't even look at him. His eyes stayed locked on Victoria's hand. "Lower it," he warned quietly, "before I make that choice for you." Victoria swallowed, the first crack in her practiced confidence. She slowly lowered her hand, eyes darting between Silas's imposing frame and Genevieve's steady gaze. Genevieve kept her voice calm, almost serene. "Silas, why are you here?" His jaw flexed once. "Because you called. Maybe not with a phone, but with that look you get right before you refuse to be stepped on again." A soft wave rippled through the crowd. Guests whispered, hungry for scandal. Preston scoffed. "Genevieve doesn't know people like you. She pours coffee for a living." Silas finally turned to Preston, his expression unreadable. "She used to," he said. "Before you mistook kindness for weakness." Genevieve's stomach tightened, not with shame, but with the weight of a truth she could no longer outrun. Preston's glare sharpened, insecurity flickering behind the facade he had carefully curated for years. "Genevieve," he hissed, "why is this man talking like he knows you?" Before she could speak, a glass shattered near the orchestra platform, a guest dropping it from sheer tension. The conductor raised a hand as if to restart the music, but froze when he saw Silas step forward. "I'm here," Silas said, voice dropping lower, "because you've pushed her far enough." Victoria snapped back into her confidence like a snake recoiling. "You don't get to lecture my family," she barked. "This girl should be grateful we even." Genevieve stepped forward, cutting her off. "Enough." The single word wasn't loud, but it held a force no one in the hall had ever heard from her. Preston blinked, startled. Victoria stiffened. Even the servers standing along the wall straightened unconsciously. Genevieve handed her tray to the nearest waiter and unbuttoned the stiff catering cuffs at her wrists. "You've talked over me for 3 years," she said quietly. "Tonight you listen." Victoria laughed sharply. "To what?" "Your sob story. You think this man, what's your name?" "Silas. You think he gives you power?" Silas didn't react. Genevieve did. "I don't need him for power," she said. "I need him for truth." A murmur swept the room. She took a breath, steadying her voice. You call me a nobody, Victoria. Burden. Mistake. And Preston, she turned to her husband. You let them. Preston rolled his eyes. Are you really doing this in front of everyone? You're overreacting. I'm done. Her voice cracked, not with weakness but with release. Done apologizing for existing. Done letting you decide what I'm worth. Victoria stepped forward again, too close, too loud. You have nothing without us. Nothing. We took you in out of pity. Silas's hand shot up, not touching Victoria, just stopping her with a gesture that carried more authority than any title. That's where you're wrong. He reached into his inner jacket pocket and pulled out a small envelope. He didn't hand it to Genevieve. He handed it to Victoria. She snatched it, ripped it open, and froze. What is this? She demanded. Silas's voice sharpened. Documentation. Of where Genevieve Hayes actually comes from. What she actually owns. What she actually walked away from. Preston grabbed the papers from his mother, eyes darting across the lines. His face drained almost instantly. That's fake, he muttered. Has to be. This says she has more money than the entire Sterling family combined, Silas finished for him. Gasps shot through the room. Genevieve closed her eyes for a brief second, not out of triumph but out of grief, because she had never wanted this unveiled. Not like this. But she held her ground. Preston stared at her. His voice barely more than a whisper. You lied to me. She shook her head. I didn't lie. I just didn't tell you something you never bothered to ask. Victoria lunged toward Genevieve, venom on her tongue, but this time Silas didn't wait for her to raise a hand. He moved between them again. You touch her, he said, and the next thing you feel will be the floor. Victoria stumbled back. Genevieve exhaled slowly. I didn't want your money, she said. I wanted a family. I waited for Preston to defend me. To see me. To choose me. Preston's jaw clenched. You're twisting everything. I was under pressure. You were comfortable, she corrected. Comfortable letting me be your family's punching bag. Guests whispered feverishly now. Phones subtly lifted to record. The Sterlings were losing the one thing they valued more than money. Image. At that moment, the event coordinator rushed to the stage, panic in his steps. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced shakily, we've received word from the board. There will be an emergency shareholders meeting tonight. Arthur Sterling, standing near the bar, snapped his head around. What? Why? Silas answered without hesitation. Because while your wife was busy degrading Genevieve, your legal team missed the notice that someone, he nodded toward Genevieve, called in her shares. What shares? Preston sputtered. The 15% she inherited from her mother, Silas said. The shares she never used until today. Gasps erupted again. Some guests stepped away from the Sterlings entirely, unwilling to be seen on the sinking ship. Victoria's voice cracked like glass hitting marble. You wouldn't dare. Genevieve held her gaze. You dared to humiliate me at every chance. Yes, I dare. Arthur Sterling elbowed through the crowd toward them. You little. Silas blocked him instantly. Choose your next words carefully. Arthur's face purpled with fury. You don't understand what she's doing. She's destroying us. Genevieve's answer was calm. No. I'm ending what you built on cruelty. The ballroom doors suddenly opened wider than before. A dozen reporters surged forward, cameras flashing like lightning. Someone shouted, Ms. Hayes, is it true you're the silent shareholder who froze Sterling Logistics this afternoon? Victoria shrieked. You did what? Genevieve didn't flinch. Yes. Chaos swallowed the room. Preston grabbed her arm desperately. Jen, please listen, we can fix this. She stepped out of his grip. You had years to fix it. You chose not to. Victoria lunged again, but this time she wasn't stopped by Silas. She was stopped by security. The ballroom guards, responding to the noise and the reporters crowding in, restrained her as she screamed threats at anyone within reach. The sight drew a wave of shocked silence from every corner of the hall. Arthur staggered back, trying to steady himself, but two federal officers approached him with quiet efficiency, badges raised. "Arthur Sterling, we need to speak with you." He paled. "This is a private matter." "It's a financial matter," the agent corrected. "And now it's a federal one." Preston turned to flee the reporters, but ran straight into another pair of officers. "Preston Sterling," one said, "you're under investigation for falsifying quarterly earnings. Please come with us." No, wait. This isn't. Genevieve, help me." Genevieve met his desperate gaze for the first time without fear. "I helped you for 3 years," she said softly. "Now you face what you chose." Officers escorted him out as he shouted her name, but the crowd parted like he was a ghost. The music had stopped. The glamour had evaporated. And 3,000 crystals hanging from the chandeliers seemed suddenly colder. Silas stepped beside Genevieve. "You did what needed to be done." She didn't answer immediately. Her eyes drifted across the hall, the same hall where she scrubbed floors, carried trays, endured insults, swallowed pain. Now she stood taller, stronger, entirely unbroken. "Silas," she murmured, "take me outside." He offered his arm. She took it. They walked out through the same door she once entered in silence, this time with cameras flashing, guests whispering her name with awe, not scorn. And behind them, the Sterling Empire collapsed piece by piece, like a mansion finally paying for every rotten brick. But this wasn't the end. It was only the moment before the world learned who Genevieve Hayes truly was. And when that truth reached the surface, the Sterlings would lose far more than their wealth. Outside the Sterling Grand Hall, the night air felt different. Cooler, quieter, almost as if the city itself paused to witness what Genevieve had become. She stood beneath the marble archway, watching the flashing lights fade while Silas remained a steady presence at her side. For the first time in years, her shoulders weren't weighed down by fear or the need to shrink herself into someone else's comfort. She didn't celebrate the downfall behind those doors. Instead, she let the reality settle. She had walked through fire not to punish, but to reclaim the pieces of herself she once gave away too easily. The ache was still there, but now it was the kind that comes before healing. Sharp, honest, necessary. Silas glanced at her, searching her face. "You ready?" Genevieve nodded, not because she knew exactly what came next, but because she no longer needed permission to move forward. "I am," she said. "And this time I'm stepping into my life on my terms." They walked toward the waiting car, the streetlights casting a long, steady glow across the pavement. Behind them, the last guests drifted out of the hall, whispering her name with something that had never followed her before: respect. As Genevieve closed the car door, a quiet certainty settled in her chest. Truth hadn't just freed her. It had reshaped her. If this journey touched you, please like, share, and subscribe to support Canada's Heartfelt Tales. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories to life.